Hey guys, this is Kevin here with Hanna Instruments, and today we're going to be talking about salinity in your aquarium. So measuring salinity is measuring generally how many dissolved salts are in the water, and it's obviously one of the most important parameters to measure because it's often one of the first things we test for in a reef aquarium or saltwater aquarium. This is because when you're filling up your aquarium, you usually have to mix artificial seawater with salts and usually RODI water, reverse osmosis deionized water, in order to kind of create this artificial reef habitat. So in order to know how much salt we need to add, we need to measure the salinity values. There's a couple ways to do that, but we like to use our digital refractometer at Hanna Instruments, our HI 96822 digital seawater refractometer. So salinity plays an important role in just about every aspect of the aquarium health, between all your fish and coral and things like that. So, you know, having too much salinity is definitely not a good thing, but having too little salinity is also not a good thing. So for the most time, we generally want to shoot for about 1.025 specific gravity or 1.026 specific gravity, depending on what kind of corals you keep or what kind of inhabitants you have. But for the most part, it's also important to constantly monitor salinity, because as your aquarium evaporates, or as water evaporates from your aquarium, you're going to see an increase in salinity. That's because as water evaporates, the dissolved salts are usually going to stay there while it's going to become less dilute. So we usually have to add fresh water back in, either by an auto top-off system or just manually adding top-off water via RODI water or tap water, whatever you decide to use. Preferably, it's usually best to use a pure water source like RODI water, just to remove any potential contaminants from the water. But there's a lot of different ways to measure salinity. You can have hydrometers, swing-arm hydrometers, optical refractometers, or we like to use our digital seawater refractometer. This is our HI 96822 digital seawater refractometer. It's designed just for artificial or natural seawater. And these are a really great little device to use, partially because it has something called automatic temperature compensation. Now, when you are measuring salinity via refractive index, and this is how this is using, it's using a light source and bending that light source, and based on the amount of dissolved particles in the water, it's going to give you a value of specific gravity, practical salinity units, or parts per thousand. But when you're doing a refractive index, a measurement for salinity, one of the most important things to have in correlation with that is something called automatic temperature compensation, or ATC. And this is because as water heats up or cools down, the ions in the water will move faster or slower, thus can give you a different refractive index or a different value. This is really important to note because a lot of the optical refractometers we use in the aquarium hobby, they have a very narrow temperature compensation range, usually about 78, 80 degrees. Generally what you would find in a saltwater aquarium, they kind of match that, but they really can't vary too much. Now, the nice thing about our digital seawater refractometer is it can range anywhere from about 35 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. So you really don't have to worry too much about your water having, you know, whether your water's hot or cold or things like that for a measurement. Like, let's say you have a water sample that's been sitting in your car, or if you're mixing a batch of salt water and you haven't had time for your heater to set up yet, it's going to be good to make sure you have a refractometer that's going to be compensating the temperature here. So if you look on the screen, you know, we could see there's going to be a temperature unit down there, and it's also going to be a just a regular value right there as well, where the number is going to be displayed. And it's a really great device because you can also just calibrate this just with RODI water. There's no special solutions you need to calibrate it. Just strictly use DI or RODI or distilled water to calibrate it. And it's nice too because it measures the sample temperature on the plate. So if you actually see, if I put my hand on that plate there, you actually see the sample temperature start to rise a bit because it's reading the warmth from my hand. So it will actually measure the sample temperature on that plate and then compensate for any differences brought about by the temperature and the salinity value. So if we were going to run a test here, it's super easy. So I have my seawater sample right here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to add some deionized water right to the plate here. And you just want to fill up that entire black well, make sure there's no air bubbles in there. So once we get that filled up, we're going to make sure there's no air bubbles. We're going to cover this plate with our hand just to make sure there's no external light sources impeding the optical sensors. And we're just going to hit this 0 button. So it's going to flash, then we're going to 0 out to our first reading, and now the meter is calibrated. Then we're going to gently take a Kim wipe or paper towel or some soft tissue, and we're just going to let this water absorb there. You want to be careful you don't scratch the glass there or anything like that, just to prevent any sort of damage to the reader or to the optical sensor. And once this is all wiped up and dry, we're going to take some of our salt water here. We're going to add the salt water straight to that plate. Again, fill it up. Make sure there's no air bubbles. Going to cover that sample well again. Hit read. And you notice we get a salinity value of 1.026, which is a perfect salinity for our aquarium. So another good thing about this meter is it comes with a 2-year warranty direct from Hanna Instruments. So if there's any problems with the meter within 2 years of the date of purchase, we will happily replace or repair it for you. Thank you so much for watching our video today. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn about salinity in your aquarium. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more updates in the future.